We've kind of got people from northeast South Dakota all the way down to south central Nebraska, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
At a distance.
And Dave, if you're on,
He is.
okay, perfect. Does Hastings have a city sign anywhere? I could not find one.
We do have a city sign when you come into town from the north, Lori. It's right at the high
Okay,
school.
okay. Yes, Hastings is the county seat, as I mentioned there, for Adams County. Lots of good things going on in Hastings.
I see Sharon. Hello, Sharon.
Hello, how are you?
I hope you don't mind, Lori, but I'm just going to like to talk occasionally. But,
That's fine. You know, we have no Robert's Rules of Order assigned to this, so
Really?
you just go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I see
We've had
Amanda.
a
That's good. I see a few of our folks from South Dakota. I have to admit, I had a breakdown in technology today. We have a texting app that sends out a reminder to people the day of Thriverr Live event, and normally I'd be sending out a text email, but it didn't go out today. So I've been scrambling.
Well, I think we did send out a reminder this morning as well. So if they registered with us, as they would have,
I think
get
folks
a
are a little
reminder.
bit of slackers. We don't sign up till the last minute. How about it, Amanda? Is that your pattern? Yeah.
It is all good.
Yeah, I usually get it in my calendar, but then I forget to actually register.
At least you downloaded it ahead of time. That's cool. That's always good. So we've got beautiful weather here in South Dakota today.
Yeah.
I think it's 70. Yeah. It's 74 here, I think, last check in Holdridge. So we're to the west of Hastings, about 53, 55 miles. So probably similar conditions there.
I live in northeast South Dakota myself in Watertown, and it's maybe only 65 or so here, but the wind is not blowing, which is a joy. We like that.
Nice.
Tomorrow it's going to be like 30 miles an hour.
I think we're supposed to get up into the 80s tomorrow, or upper 70s, lower 80s.
Wow. We'll be to the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be sending that crappy weather down this way.
I froze at grandkid football games on Sunday and it was 53 degrees, but the wind was oh so cold.
I was down in Denver the last week and it was gorgeous down there. It was awesome.
Sorry, my phone is blowing up. People want to talk to me, so they will just wait. So it is 2 o'clock. I do hear people joining us. So 30 more seconds and then we begin to roll. How's that sound, Mike? Or is that
Sounds
okay?
great. Yeah.
Okay. So, and Sherry, are you ready?
I think we need a little competition like what Krista has going. I love South Dakota is what I notice on Chris over her shoulder there. So we should have some I love Nebraska signs. I'm looking through. I love the state, all the states with the license plates. Is that Dina? Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It is. There is one of those just for the Nebraska counties that I would love to have. I think I saw it in one of the state senators' offices a couple years ago. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. So anyway, how about we just go ahead and get started? Mike, if you're ready, let's dive in. How's that sound?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, well, welcome to all of you who are joining us. This is the October 2023 edition of HomeNE, but it is actually a unique and joint collaboration with Thriverr Live. from South Dakota, and just in a few moments you'll be hearing a little bit more about Thriverr. So welcome to our friends and neighbors from South Dakota who are joining us, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Today is a blend, as I mentioned, of two distinct and unique and similar, and all the adjectives I can subscribe to that, learning networks that are surrounded and talking about housing, the challenges and possible solutions for the challenges that rural communities face in our state. So my co-facilitator today is Mike Knudsen from Dakota Resources. Mike, welcome to you and your individuals. And so would you just take a few moments here to introduce yourself and share a little bit more about Thriverr Live with the HomeNE participants today?
Absolutely. I love hearing all these dingings going on of people who are continuing to join. Yeah, so my name is Mike Knudsen. I work for Dakota Resources. We're headquartered here in South Dakota as a CDFI, a community development financial institution serving rural South Dakota. And our mission is to connect capital and capacity to empower rural leaders, people like you. And so to that end, we have a $33 million loan fund where we lend to economic development corporations, but we also work at connecting capacity. And it's that knowledge, the skills, those talents that really exist in here in this room on this Zoom call, but across rural South Dakota. We've got a lot of the answers. We just need to better connect to those answers and help each other out in the process. And so to that end, we host a couple of events like this a month. We call them Thriverr Live sessions. They're a part of our Thriverr network. We call them Thriverr Live because we believe that we can co-create the answers together. And so we're going to challenge you a little bit today to not just sit and listen. Listening is great. How can we help each other take what we hear and implement in our own communities? So that's the first thing I want to challenge you to do. My next challenge is to have you all turn to your chat feature right now. I'm asking each of you to type in your name and your community that you represent, and then to answer a yes/no question. So it's a name, community, yes/no question to this. Do you have a building on your main street that could be redeveloped? Yes or no? Do you have a building on your main street that could be redeveloped? And challenge you all to answer that. I'd just like to get a sense of where people are at and who's all in the room. Maybe we can connect to each other, even though we don't know each other very well right now across our state lines. But let's see if we can do it. Again, name, community, maybe it's a region, and also just the answer yes, no. Do you have a building in your main street that could be redeveloped? I have to admit, I don't even have my chat open. It looks like we're getting a lot of yeses, right? Yeah, right, we do. Good, yeah. So that's it. But now let me ask you the second question. I'm not asking you to put it in the chat right now, but my second question for you is, what's the challenge you're having when it comes to redeveloping that building? What's the challenge? What's the hang up? Why isn't it happening right now? Now, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and type it into the chat, but I'd let you just think about that. I think that's why we're all here today, is to figure out what's that challenge, and then to hear somebody else who's been successful and start to plug in the pieces. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Lori.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I see a common theme already in some of the answers to your question. I'm seeing dollar signs. I'm seeing the word money, sometimes lack of vision, getting past what a crazy idea. So lots of great information being added. So feel free to peruse through that. Wow. And I'm Lori Ferguson, and I'm with South Central Economic Development District in Holdridge. We serve a 13-county region, and we serve as the lead agent for our housing learning network that we call HomeNE. It is designed for people from all across Nebraska, as well as surrounding states in the region. We've had individuals in the past join us from Minnesota and Texas and Iowa and of course South Dakota, but it's a network geared towards addressing and discussing housing challenges that are being faced in our rural communities. We provide face-to-face as well as online opportunities for participants to foster interaction, engagement, as well as skill building for the local leaders, as well as the people who are passionate about housing in their communities. It's not always the leader's role. Sometimes the best ideas come from the community itself and the people who are passionate. So HomeNE was originally launched in February of 2018. And to date, we have hosted over 60 of these webinars, all surrounding housing. And we have also convened several housing gatherings across the state of Nebraska. So we are excited today for this joint venture with Thriverr and with Mike and all of you who are joining us from the great state of South Dakota. So we do have a lot of handoffs today. And Mike, I'm going to toss it back to you to move us to the next portion of our presentation.
Great. Well, and I think I'm tasked with giving you a little bit of an overview of what is happening. Is that our next slide? What's our agenda here today? Yeah, here we go. And so as you look at this, I just invite you to understand that we have two speakers today. We've tasked them with sharing their story in 7 or 8 to 10 minutes. And then we're going to give another, maybe 7, 8 minutes to you to ask questions. There's no way they can tell all of their story in that time. But if you're thinking of the question that's most important to you, if you are thinking about it, it's your opportunity then to get that answer from them. So be thinking, be ready to engage, be ready to jump in. After that, we are hoping to send you to some breakout rooms. We want to connect you to other people who you may not know very well today. And we've got a few questions that we'll do in that space. So hang around for that as well. But now, with that, I think I introduce Tom Farber, who is our guest presenter from South Dakota. I got to know Tom just a few years ago. He's, I think, a bit of a Renaissance man. He does a little of everything as a community leader in his community. He's an insurance agent. He's a lending officer at a bank. He's also owns a movie theater. I think he bought the movie theater because he wanted his community to have a movie theater. He's bought houses, redeveloped houses, and I think it's mostly because he wants what's best for his community. And so today he's going to talk about a building that he bought on Main Street in Britain and how he redeveloped it and used housing as a key component of it. So with that, I realized that I need to start sharing my screen for Tom. All right. So Tom, let me go right here.
Hi. As you mentioned, I'm from Britain, South Dakota, population of about 1,300 people. And this project, the Farber Loft Apartment project, started, well, basically it started back in 2018 when I purchased the building. I was approached by the retired dentist to buy the building because he knew that if I bought it, I would fix it up and it was in need of repair. And he was offered more money by somebody else from Aberdeen, South Dakota, but he also knew that they were not going to fix it up. And I had a common interest in it, in that the wall that was a part of this building shared a wall with our movie theater, which is right next door. And so I was definitely interested. So from that time when I purchased that building, I was looking at restoring it as much as I could. And the main part of that was the second level, which had been 4 apartments, very small 1-bedroom apartments with a bathroom in the hall. And there was, a sink in the kitchen and a shower, but you had to go outside to use the bathrooms in the hallway. And it was not set up very well at all. And so I did a lot of planning, research, and decided I wanted to turn this space, which was, again, 4 units, into 2 units and make them 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And there was 23 steps up there to this second level. And so I knew that I was not going to get senior citizens unless I could install an elevator. And an elevator was not in the cards, too expensive. I explored lift chairs, and I figured that without attached garages or anything like that, that was not a likely way to proceed. So I started the project in the fall of 18, and pretty much all of 19 was reconstruction. And what I'm going to do is try to paraphrase a presentation I made in Pierce, South Dakota back in July of 2020. And which basically the project overview is who was I trying to attract with this project? And Mike, you can show the first slides there if you got that. The target market for these apartments, I figured, was going to have to be somebody that was in their 20s, early 30s, probably didn't have any kids, or if they did, just 1 or 2 children. And that's why the 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartments. I figured it was something that it would have to appeal to that age people climbing stairs and not necessarily worried about where they're going to park their car in the wintertime. So that's what my market was. Let's see here. And I should mention too that the upper level of this building hadn't been lived in since 1982. And it was like a blast from the past. Literally, there was refrigerators from 1940s, furniture from the 1940s. It was, people just walked away from it. And so it was a wide open canvas, and we gutted the whole building up the upper level, I should say. And because below this, there was an optometrist, vision care associates, and a dentist. So one thing that sets us apart from other projects that you would have in other communities is I had a good source of income already. But if I wouldn't have fixed it up, eventually they probably would have went looking for another home, because the building did need a lot of work. And the one saving grace was that it had a fairly new roof, a rubber membrane roof. And so I didn't have to worry about that at all. But, you know, I always want to clarify to people that I had income. And so the fact that I was putting a lot of money into it, while it was a risk, it wasn't as big a risk as you could take on in some other communities if you're trying to do a whole building. And but I'm the developer of the project. I didn't really have any assistance. I got financing through Northeast South Dakota Economic Corporation, which is part of Grow South Dakota, based out of Sisseton, South Dakota. They were my primary financier. And this building was originally a corner grocery store. And in 1945, it had a catastrophic fire. So from 1913, when it was built, to 1945, it was primarily, the second level was offices, then converted to apartments. And it was lastly apartments up to 1982. Unique characteristics of the building: had 22 large windows, and I didn't want to cover those in. I think it's a shame. Some of these buildings architecturally have a lot of windows for a reason. Back when they were built, they needed it because they didn't have, you know, much for lighting and everything. But to cover them up would just wreck the look of the building and everything. The location for this building was a very good location. It was a block from the school, a half a block from the grocery store. So if somebody didn't have the means to get around very well, this building, you know, fit that bill. Here, the picture you're seeing in front of you there, it shows the windows that are being put in at the time. And the dental vision care office is below, where the door is in the middle of the building. And that was actually all redone later on for a different reason. And if I get time, I'll share that with you. But this part didn't look too bad. But when you walk in the door upstairs, you see the old chairs, the checkerboard floor, old for refrigerators. It was, like I say, it was walking into a blast in the past. The size of the building is 25 by 140. Of that, 25 by 100 was the original building. After the catastrophic fire in 1945, they added on to the back, and it actually had a butcher shop in that. But you can see the picture of the old bed in the room there. That was in there since probably 52 or whatever, and had obviously been lived in for quite some time. I decided on going with this project, and I did this by myself. And a little bit about my background: I am president of the Britain Economic Development Corporation. but that has been overshadowed over the past 10 years by Glacial Lakes Area Development, which is another development corporation in our community. And they have a paid director. I never was paid for anything, and not that I was doing it for pay, but it just became easier for other projects to go through Glacial Lakes Area Development. And because they were a 501c3, we were a 501c4, and that's just a little bit of background there. But I'm still president. We still have some development projects going on, but I found sometimes that it's easier when there's not a committee working on things. You probably all figured that out. Sometimes a committee can stifle things, and I'm kind of a take charge kind of guy, and I look at something and see if it's worth of fixing. The question came out earlier today was, is there a project on your main street that you worked on? My insurance office used to be across the street, and right next to it was an old cafe that the roof had caved in and part of it. And we were getting this terrible smell into my insurance office. And I took it upon myself to buy the building, and I fixed that building up. So I definitely know what it takes to fix a building up. A lot of sweat and hard work. Let's see, the cost, of the project. This is a layout here showing you go up the stairs to get to this, and it's 23 steps. I tell anybody that's moving into it, you realize if you're moving into this apartment, you're becoming part of a 23-step program. And some of them look at me and say, "What are you talking about?" Well, there's so many steps if you're an alcoholic to getting cured from or helped out with that. Well, this is a 23-step program to get up to these apartments. So this is the layout, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And back to this is what I was confronted with. Had to tear out all the walls and all the doors. And here's parts, plaster coming down, you name it. But it was very good space. And none of these walls were load-bearing walls. So, because there was 4 feet above the 10-foot walls in this space already. And then below me, there was 4 feet that used to be part of the grocery store. So we had plenty of room for plumbing, updating the plumbing and wiring and everything. And here's just various stages of fixing that up and everything. I've been asked before, what did this project cost? With the building factored in, the building purchase price and everything, all the things that I did this, the cost cash-wise was about $338,000, which figures into about $140.91 per square foot back in 2019. Today, that would be substantially different, but this took just crappy, unusable space. And as you can see, as the stages here, it really turned out nice. The ceiling you're seeing in this picture here is vinyl plank, Armstrong vinyl plank ceiling, basically boards. And that was great because I could leave the plaster in the ceiling in, and we just put furring strips over it and then put this over that. There was plenty of space. And of course, it's all been updated with the newest wiring, lighting, and everything. The picture here on the left is actually the fire escape entrance through a window. The original fire escape to the building was clear in the back of the building. And this is a much safer, I think, access point if there would ever be a fire. And the flooring you see on the floor there, that's a vinyl plank flooring, great to work with. And the other thing about this closet space, there is closet space galore in these apartments. And it may be overkill, but you just never know who you're going to get. And I really didn't want one tiny apartment that was, maybe would be filled. And this way, I haven't had a vacancy since I opened these up. And they first became available in March of 2020 after an open house. So they turned out very well. You'll see it up in the cove The cove in the top there, that is styrofoam. And what an easy thing to put up. It looks great. It looks like it's painted, but it's very light. It's actually glued up with caulking to the ceiling. And so I tried to, think of it as a place that would I want to live here? And the answer is yes. It's very good. The only thing bad about it is we don't have off-street parking per se. So in the wintertime, everybody's got to move their vehicles to get the snowplow through and everything.
So Tom, we're about out of time for that. I'm just wondering what are the other key things that you want to offer before we open it up for questions?
I guess just, I've asked what's the rent, and this is probably going to seem way too cheap for anybody. When I opened it, it was $600 a month for each apartment. We're now up to $650. Still excellent. But the thing is, it's affordable. And for the most part, I believe the renters are taking very good care of it. And it's affordable housing. And that's what I guess I'm all about. Is it affordable? I don't care if I make a lot on it initially. Over time, it'll pay for itself and then you can make money. But yeah, so I guess that would be the one thing that I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So we want to open it up here for some questions. And I have the first an apology, Tom. I wasn't moving the slides apparently, even though I was showing that they're moving on my end. So my apologies for that. We got them going later. But my question as the first one is, do you feel like this is a need to rent to young people, and is this attracting younger people to your community?
I would say so. Yes. The one girl that lives in the place now, she was originally from Langford, and she works out at our manufacturing north of town. And the thing that enticed them is her parents work also at a manufacturing north of town, or one does. And they thought in the wintertime that if they get snowed into Britain, they could stay with her. And so she's got 2 bedrooms and perfect situation. The other couple that's working just moved back to Britain. One's a deputy sheriff and one's a dog groomer. And I would say they're probably late 20s, early 30s. And the other one is just graduated high school this last year. So it's got to be somebody that can take the steps. That's just the way it is.
Thanks. Other questions?
There's 2 apartments in the building.
Or do we? Yeah. Okay. And we've got some coming into the chat here now. I must have missed it. How many apartment buildings are there how many apartments are in the building?
There's just the 2 apartments in the building. Yes.
And 2 bedrooms in each one.
Right.
I have another question. Has parking been an issue as far as snow removal, interruptions, adjoining businesses, etc.?
I tell the tenants that the snowplows are on Main Street and on the side streets right away, and I tell them where they should be able to park, and it hasn't not been a problem yet. No. Britain's population 1,300, so it's not like we have rush hour in the morning, or anything like that. So yeah.
Somebody else might have been trying to jump in earlier and I cut them off. Did I miss somebody?
That was actually me, Mike, directing you to the chat box.
Thank you.
So.
Tom, one of the things that I hear at times is that, we got to have a fire escape that, or an elevator or that exterior fire escape becomes a barrier to people taking on a project. Did you find it challenging to get the proper fire escape in South Dakota?
Well, in South Dakota, I did some research. There really wasn't much available about fire escapes. The fire escape that we put in actually has a roll-up ladder that push a lever and it falls down and gets you about 6 feet off the ground.
Great. We've got some more questions here for you then. So you tore the plaster, you tore down plaster walls, but left the ceilings. You said it was LVP plank ceiling.
Armstrong vinyl. Let's see. I've got that written down here. Just bear with me a second. It was by Armstrong. It's a product that I got at Menards. And no, I didn't get it at Menards. This was one of my I actually ended up buying it at the lumberyard in Britain and saved money. And the nice thing about it was they delivered it, so I didn't have to try to haul it all upstairs. But it's Armstrong ceiling plank is, I think, is the other name for it. And it's all painted, and you just have to put it up. And that's why I left the plaster. If I had taken the plaster down, it would have been a lot more stuff. The plaster in the ceilings actually was not too bad. And so I said, why create more work for myself when we had to put furring strips up anyway for this ceiling? And that was my rationale for that.
Yeah, thanks. And Kelsey, feel free to reach out to him if you have additional questions. Scott asks, did the lower story businesses have hesitations? Whoop, and now my screen just jumped as somebody else completed. Did the lower story building business have hesitations about residential housing above in the building? You know, like concerns about the sink leaking or other problems?
You know, before things were fixed up, I would say that would have been a big resounding yes, it would have been a problem. But actually, no.
Okay. And who's on that floor? That's kind of the next one. If they're not complaining, why not? Who are they?
Who? I don't understand the question.
Oh, who's on the ground floor? My mistake.
Oh, Vision Care Associates is half of the building, and then the other is a dental office.
Got it.
Which right now is empty, but I'm hoping that's going to be resolved here in the next 6 months.
Yeah, and I think this will be the last question. I hope it's not too long, but one last question is considering the materials and labor, best guess dollar estimate. What is that? Best guess dollar estimate. Did you share that earlier?
Best guess dollar estimate for what?
For the cost, I assume. Okay, considering the materials and labor, best guess dollar estimate is the question. And I'm assuming, Steve, would you jump in with anything else you'd explain that with?
I mean, it's just as far as materials.
Is that your question, Steve? We can't hear you, Steve, unfortunately. My mistake. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. When I built it, it was $140.91 a square foot, if that was the question. That's what my cost was per square foot. Yeah.
Thanks.
And one thing I want to mention too, that when we were asked to come to Pier to present this, I'll try to get this quick. We were asked to bring a problem in our community. And so we had apartments in Britain that had sat empty since 2001. And I brought a picture of these apartments. It was a 24-plex that had sat empty for 20 some years. And out of that meeting in Pier, I brought this up. Individuals from SLE, HME Management in Brookings, South Dakota came up to me and said, we're interested in doing this project. They started in the summer of 2021 and finished up, COVID hitting and everything. And they finished that up in August of last year. So it happens. There's good things come out of meetings.
Yeah, and what Tom is saying, many of you have been to your HomeNE gathering. Tom came and presented this at our housing gathering that we host. We do a process called the reverse RFP, where we connect people to other people doing projects. And these developers came and met with Tom in that just a short amount of time, and then the whole project emerged from that. So thanks, Tom. Hey, and thank you, Tom, for giving that talk. But we need to move on. I'm turning it over to Lori. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Tom. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dave Rippey. He is the co-owner of Queen City Development in Hastings. And I first met Dave when I was fairly new here at SCED in Holdridge. And so it's just been a pleasure of mine to work with Dave. I've served as the Community Development Block Grant Administrator on a couple of his projects through the city of Hastings. So Dave, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get started with your presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Lori. As Lori said, my name is Dave Rippey. I'm in Hastings, Nebraska. I also have my wife, Christy, on this slide. Christy's the brains of our operation, but she does not do Zoom presentations. And so just acknowledging that she's the one that makes everything happen here. And Sherry, if you want to advance the slide. the caveat in the introduction here is that we're not professional developers at all. We moved to this town in 2010 and had a vision that it could be a better place than what it was, and wanted to be a part of that. And so we started looking at different opportunities to engage in that type of activity. You can go ahead and advance sharing. And what we really got into is just and what I've been, I think, more into over the last few years is just understanding how communities function. And so I previously served as the director of economic development here in Hastings for a bit, and then our state's director of economic development, at which time I became incredibly curious about what makes communities tick, and have done quite a bit of reading on that topic. And that understanding who does these things has really kind of helped me to understand how that manifests itself, and even in ourselves. You can go ahead, sharing. And understanding that about a small percentage of people, we can advance the slide, are engaged in the activity of community building. And there's a fair amount of people that are simply just consume a community. And so we can kind of click through these pretty quick. And we can go to the next one. And really, when you start looking at like who does these things in a lot of our rural towns, it's not necessarily like really smart housing developers. In fact, I'm a case study. We are a case study in that it's not really smart people at all that do this. It's people that surround themselves with smart people. It's people who care about their community, and people who ask why and how out of a love for their community, more so than maybe being an incredibly astute developer, which we're most certainly not. Next slide, please, sharing. My background, as I said, is in economic and community development. Next slide. And now do some work here in town just with our college. My wife has her own interiors business. You can go ahead and click ahead, Sherry. And so we work together on a daily basis and trying to effectuate projects. Looking here, so we started downtown. We did our own personal residence. It's not in these pictures, but between the years of 2014 and 2015, and did a single family, 3-bed, 2.5 bath, second level home. And that's when we really started looking at opportunities that were around the corner from us. We had a street full of vacant buildings, and started trying to understand what we could do with those. And so we put together, Tom had mentioned kind of doing it alone. We're really the opposite here. I put together a group of 4 of us in 2015, local business owners and people who had a vested interest in the success of the community, to start looking at how we could aggregate capital in order to mitigate our own risk, right? Like, it's a lot of risk for someone to take on one of these projects. Like Tom outlined, there's risk involved with that. And this kind of started as a hobby for us, and buildings kind of came available. And so aggregating that capital amongst partners who had a vested interest in the success of the community was really a model that we used. Go ahead, Sherry. What I've got is just a number of pictures here, and then I think later on we've got some time in the breakouts where we can maybe ask some more specific questions. But since 2014, counting our own personal residence, we've done about 70,000 square feet of redevelopment in downtown Hastings that us and our partners own. That accounts for 30 rental units, studios, 1-beds, 2-beds, and about 30,000 square feet of commercial retail space. That's a number of different local employers. We've done all of that in a very concentrated area of town. We've got all of the buildings on one block. And so we've realized some benefits from the density here. And when I say we, just to be very clear, like, again, there's an ownership group here, but it only happens because of a platform that our community has built, okay? And so as we kind of look at some of this stuff, I just want to be very clear that all of this redevelopment that we're kind of talking about starts and stops with our Community Redevelopment Authority. And that's an authority, a taxing authority of the city of Hastings that has tremendous leadership, not only from their director, Randy Chick, but also their board of directors. They will buy and hold a number of the properties that we're looking at here in these pictures were acquired by the Redevelopment Authority, and we worked hand in hand with them with proposals and incentives and their knowledge on redevelopment. And so, but for the Community Redevelopment Authority, the taxing entity in the city of Hastings, I would say none of what we've been able to accomplish would have happened. And so, like I said, we've taken on, and you can advance again, over between 2015. So this is a Google image right here from 2012. So this would have been just a few years before we got started. And so on the left, you can see the south side of First Street, and those were all at different times, kind of different levels of vacant. On the right side here, that big white building, that was eventually acquired by our redevelopment authority, and it had some tenants that kind of paid rent, some tenants that kind of didn't. Go ahead, Sherry, in advance. And so then, oh, go back one. So then over the last several years, we've had the opportunity to redevelop all of those buildings. And in fact, the one on the left is the one that I'm sitting in right now. We just got occupancy last week. And so this image here is probably about a month old, 2 months old. Google just came through town apparently, and so even that's a little bit updated. Okay. We finished out the block here. Go ahead, Sherry, with offices, and really we've seen now a demand for that. We have more and more people living downtown, so we have more and more people asking, like, where are we going to work? And so you can go ahead and click again. So this is kind of what our finished block looks like right now. What this has done for us also, and Tom kind of mentioned their early target market, young professionals. That's what we saw right away, people in their 20s. But as our downtown has matured due to the efforts of our redevelopment authority and numerous others, we've seen demand really start to pick up in the 55 and over age demographic. And so as you click forward, Sherry, so we acquired this building this last spring from our Community Redevelopment Authority. And in partnership with the state of Nebraska on an Affordable Housing Trust Fund grant, our local Economic Development Corporation with some rural workforce housing funds and our CRA, we're developing affordable housing right now on that site in the form of a couple of modern duplexes. And so you can kind of see a conceptual image there on the left of what that's going to look like with both affordable and market rate housing. That is main level housing. These are 1,500 square foot duplexes, main level primary suites, 3 beds, 2.5 baths, big vaulted areas, and just more density. Where we see a demand going downtown is maybe people who aren't quite ready to give up the house yet, maybe people who still want covered parking, etc. And so you can advance one more. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell for us. Happy to answer more detailed questions later. But like I said, my wife Christy and I are just kind of the front people for this. Really, there was a platform of redevelopment that was built in our community prior to us by our Community Redevelopment Authority and numerous others. But we've had just been the beneficiaries of a great community and tremendous partners.
Dave, we do have a question for you.
Yeah.
CRAs do not exist in South Dakota, so can you briefly explain what they are and how they work with you as a developer?
Yeah, so the CRA is an authority of our city, which is created in community development law in Nebraska state statute. And so they have taxing authority, a levy up to 2.59 cents, and so they can use that in blighted areas. And so they will go out and they can look at target areas for redevelopment that are blight and substandard. And so most of the states in the country have that ability, and I'm not sure on South Dakota. Other states utilize tools like maybe a land bank. Community foundations can also play this type of a role on the nonprofit side, where they de-risk some things a little bit. And so our redevelopment authority has been very aggressive in our community. And like I said, due to a very forward-thinking board over the years, a lot of very good board members and a very forward-thinking director, they've been aggressive in the acquisition and redevelopment of buildings and playing a really integral role in that redevelopment.
Okay. I mean, I remember when downtown Hastings was just desolate, almost dead. And it's just so vibrant now. So, yeah, so we are going to take some time and if you have questions for Dave, feel free to pop those in the chat box or open your microphone. We want to engage with our speakers today as much as possible and get your questions answered. So, Dave, you used to talk about not getting saved, that you had to save yourself. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, there was a time in our community where we were trying to do everything we could to lure in developers from Lincoln and Omaha to come in and do projects here. And obviously they've got enough projects at home to do. And so if they're going to come out here, they're going to command a premium to do so. And really, I think the realization came to a lot of us here, not just myself, but the community. The realization came to our community redevelopment authority and to other developers here that if this thing was going to fix itself, it was going to be a collection of people. And so when you drive down our main street, it's not outside investors that control the buildings, it's local developers, and it's owner operators, and it's the way these towns were built originally, right? It was people that came in with a dream, and they built the building for their business. And so I think that you see that here. And one of the reasons that you see that, because as Tom outlined, this is not an inexpensive, risk-free venture. One of the reasons that I think you see the activity that you've seen here is that we have a very enabling city that's gone out of its way to help de-risk some of that activity for the investor developers.
Okay,
It's
perfect.
very much locally driven.
Okay, we have a question. You mentioned that the last downtown project you are working on uses both Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund and Rural Workforce Housing Funds. Are you using one for each structure? Just curious, this asking entity asked because they didn't think you could use them together or in
Right.
conjunction with each
So
other.
actually two projects in the same place. And so not to, I should have anticipated a technicality there because yeah, we had to walk through that nuance, but two projects on the same site. Yeah.
I don't know if, could you just elaborate on Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund and Rural Workforce Housing Funds for our friends in South Dakota who may not be familiar with those Nebraska programs?
Sure. So the Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund was developed in the early 90s by our legislature to carve out tax dollars from the dock stamp, which is a tax that occurs on the sale of real estate, and to help promote affordable housing. And so it's a few $1,000,000 a year for each congressional district in our state, $3 to $4 million for each of our 3 congressional districts, so $10 to $12 million total that goes out to help support the development of housing up to 120% of area median income. It's incredibly competitive now. There have been when money was cheaper, it wasn't as competitive because it's a giant pain in the ass. But now that money is more expensive, it's incredibly competitive. We just found out yesterday that we lost on 2 projects that we submitted on for this year's funding application, so that was a bummer. But those funds are used to help support affordable housing, and they come from the state competitive annual grant application process. The other side of that would be rural workforce housing, which was an act that we worked with the Nebraska Bankers Association to help enact probably about 5 years ago now, I suppose. That was passed in the 2017 session and then turned loose in 18, I think. That's a more flexible fund for workforce housing that doesn't have income restrictions on it. That's more tied to the value of the rental unit or the sale unit produced. Those are awarded out by the state competitively to communities to then put to work as they see fit in their community. We've seen great success as a state with that flexible funding program. And the legislature has continued to renew that program and put dollars out across the state.
Okay, good. Kelsey wants to know if you have any thoughts about why these buildings became so empty and hollow, and how do we prevent that cycle again in the future?
Yeah, I think it's just like the evolution of communities, right? Like you saw, and again, this is from a little bit of what my area of interest is, but when our country kind of developed our transportation industrial complex in the 50s and we started incentivizing the building of roads and highways, it became a whole lot easier to go out and build new with cheap property, build a new mall and build a new strip mall and build things on the outside of town. I mean, it was just easier. Land was cheap. Roads are incentivized. And so you saw this gigantic sprawl in these communities. If you look nationwide, generally our communities have about half the density as what they did in like the 40s, right? And so if you look at our population per square mile or whatever measure you would want to use, we've spread out. And so in doing that, we kind of left the harder things behind. And so that's part of it. It got cheaper and easier to build stuff on the outside of town. The other part of it, I would say, is that, and a lot of you, I saw it in your comments, problem building owner, problem building owner, problem building owner. The acquisition of and the turnover of these buildings is generational. And we saw that, like each one of these buildings, all but like one of them, we bought from families that had held them for decades, right? And so I do think that for a long time, when we got in this cycle of disinvestment, deinvestment, like we kind of lost track and weren't active in picking up these properties, and they might have fallen into the hands of low value owners. And so with a lot of these older buildings, you just kind of have to work through then that generational ownership, and that's problematic. Private property rights are like the best thing about America, but then sometimes you walk down the street at that building that's been vacant for 30 years and you're like, this is also kind of a bad thing about what we have, but both ways.
Okay, good. Couple more questions for you. And I'm sure one of them you will maybe laugh about because I heard a story of maybe not one of your projects, but about pigeons. But did you have trouble purchasing the buildings or were they for sale? What type of shape were they in prior to redevelopment?
We've kind of run the gamut on ours. We've been, like I said, very, very fortunate on two of them that our redevelopment authority owned them, and then we were able to acquire them via the redevelopment authority. They had gone through the acquisition and again had the foresight with their board and their director to do that. Another set of buildings we bought over time from a family as they exited, did a generational transition of ownership. And so they exited from their business. And so we were able to buy that in tranches. Then it's just like the building next door to where I'm sitting right now, our ownership group bought because the owner we heard was looking to sell. And even though we weren't ready for it at all, we knew if we didn't act fast, it was a quick phone call while he was out having a beer. We knew that if we didn't act fast, then you lose it, right? Because these are generational purchases. And so I would say that when given the opportunity, we've acted very quickly with acquisition. And so that's been a benefit.
Okay, good. So, yeah, so Mike is throwing a question at you about using TIF. That Randy Chick had conversation with Mike and said that TIF was being used as a tool to redevelop in downtown Hastings. Have you used it and how is it being used? Or can you tell us a little bit more about how it's being used?
Yeah, we've used it across the board on all of our projects. And I think that I'm a firm believer that tax increment financing is one of the single best tools that communities have to direct their property taxes and their revenue stream toward the behavior that they want to see. And so for those in South Dakota, or maybe those that aren't familiar with it, tax increment financing is a tool that's built into community developmental law that essentially allows you as a developer to capture the future revenue stream of your taxes over a period of 15 years in our community. In some communities in Nebraska, like Lincoln and Omaha, up to 20 years. In some communities around the country, in other states, 25 to 30 years. You go out and capture that revenue stream. And then there are a slate of allowable uses for TIF. And so it can be used for demolition, it can be used for abatement, it can be used for planning, it can be used for utilities. Mainly, they are, and generally, broadly, they are conditions that help to prevent current or future blight and substandard conditions. And so it's a recognition nationally, tax increment financing and the program is that areas of blight and substandard conditions have occurred, they do exist. And this is a tool to incentivize developers to maybe not go out into the suburbs, but to focus their direction down here. Generally, you see that repayment occur over 15 years. But what we've seen down here is that our valuations have really escalated a lot more quickly than what we anticipated, which is a good thing for the community. And so instead of paying that back over 15 years, we paid our first TIF note back here last year in 5 years. And so that's a great deal for the community and the surrounding entities because now rather than a building that was assessed at $60,000, they have one that's assessed at $600,000 and they're collecting tax revenue off of that now from now to eternity, right? And so I think it's a great program. It's been a good program because we're in a good community where our redevelopment authority is encouraging with it and where the community understands the benefits of it. And I think that it's just like anything, you have to be an honest and a genuine user of it so that it's good for both sides.
Okay, great. So, Mike, do you have anything you want to insert at this point, or any additional
Sure.
questions for Tom?
I welcome any other questions if we've missed them, but I just point out, Dave, that we use TIF a lot in South Dakota.
Okay,
but
good.
New development, right on the edge of town, and we're not using it so much in redevelopment downtowns, which I think is really interesting, and I'm not sure why that really is. You're finding it to be a great tool, huh?
Yeah. In fact, I would just say that it's very difficult to imagine and obviously it's done, but when you look at even the bigger cities in our state, Lincoln and Omaha, any of the big projects happening in the bigger cities are all using tax increment financing downtown. And so it's been a good tool for us, and it's a very commonly used tool in urban redevelopment in urban and rural areas across our state.
Yeah, well,
It's
thank you.
probably
So-
not. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Nope.
Okay. It's probably not without its controversy, though, would you say, Dave?
Yeah, I think that if you, I mean, in some communities it can. If you were going to go out and add a new subdivision full of single-family homes, which we've done in this community, sometimes you might see a school that might have some opposition to it because you are increasing their student load. You're not and you're increasing the toll on public services, but you're not really increasing the tax revenue that's going to those things. And so some places there is maybe some objection to that. Other places you would say, gosh, we're doing whatever we can to grow in an extremely competitive environment. And so I think your more progressive communities have adopted different ways that it's palatable to use across the community.
Okay, great. Tom, I had a question for you, and we are going to continue on with our Q&A of our presenters. We've got great questions being submitted. So Tom, do you have a desire to do any more? What's the future for you and the community?
Right now, actually, I'm contemplating moving a house into Britain that's supposed to be tore down, that's out on a farm. And that's not as cheap as it used to be. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I moved in 4 houses from the Air Force Base in Grand Forks, North Dakota. So I know a little bit about what it takes to move it. But I haven't convinced myself yet that I need another project right now. But yes,
Okay.
it's always something going on there.
Okay. And Dave, you've mentioned what you're currently working on, and you mentioned the 2 trust funds. What's in the future for the city and Queen City development beyond what you've already shared?
Not a lot right now, Lori. I mean, we all looked a whole lot smarter when interest rates were 4%. And I think that's caused a little bit of a pause. I think that right now on our horizon, we're going to be in a wait and see and take care of what we have approach.
Okay, good. Tom, somebody's asking if you have an exterior photo of your building as it was restored. And maybe Mike, was that in the slides? If so, could you pull that up?
Exterior, probably not. Since those pictures were taken, the building actually got run into and had $40,000 worth of damage done to it. So the building looks quite different. Not quite different, but it looks similar, but there's differences to it because of that damage. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, and somebody just asked to clarify, Dave, did you say you've renovated 30 apartments or 30 dwellings?
Yeah, we have 30 apartments right now in our portfolio.
Okay. And I have seen some of those and they are fantastic, definitely attracting the young professional and maybe families and professionals down to downtown Hastings and creating a whole new living quarters, so to speak. So yeah, any other questions for our speakers? We had planned to do some breakout sessions, but the Q&A has been so good. We are going to skip that breakout session event this afternoon. So any final questions for our speakers? Okay. Well, if not, we will begin to conclude today's event. And Mike, I'm going to throw it back to you to share just a little bit about what's coming up with Thriverr Live.
Well, yeah, so I thought I'd share our another Thriverr Live session that we have coming up. I'm typing it in. I can't type and talk at the same time, so give me a moment. And I'm doing this especially here with you in Nebraska because I just realized, hey, one of our next guests was in the room earlier. Is Cliff still here? Cliff Messner is going to be a guest on our next webinar, along with an expert from North Carolina. And we're going to talk about the relationships between age-friendly housing, in other words, housing that really fits our seniors in our communities, and workforce housing, because we think there's a linkage in there. And how are we putting these two types of housing together to meet our community needs, and what do we need to be doing? So feel free to register for that if you are so inclined. We'll love to have you come along with us and hear what Cliff and our other guests have to say. Can I offer one last thing, Lori?
Sure. I did just want to share that somebody has asked for our speaker's contact information. We have pulled Dave's contact info back up for you. And Tom, if you would share yours either in the chat box or just Mike, if you have it readily available, that would be great as well. But go ahead and then I'll conclude.
Yeah, so I just want to especially say thank you to both of our guests here. I think that there's this incredible opportunity for us to learn more about how we're doing things across state boundaries. And it's not just that we have the answers in our own state. We need to see how people are doing things differently in other places. And I sure learned a lot from Dave. I've always learned a lot from Tom every time I hear him. And it's great to have those two types of community leaders in our places. So thank you both for joining us, and thanks for allowing us to come along today.
You're very welcome. So I also want to just let you know what's coming up and a little bit of a revisit of past webinars. If you've been a participant in HomeNE for some time, you might remember a couple of these names, but recently the Custer Economic Development Corporation in Custer County, Nebraska, honored some of our former speakers for their efforts in their communities. Ken Pitkin was awarded and I have to make sure I say it correctly, the Wheelhouse Award. He was a speaker in August of 2022, speaking about what all was going on in Callaway, Nebraska. But he got this award from the Economic Development Corporation because he is a driving force for getting stuff done, not only in his community, but also in Custer County. He has partnered with the city of Broken Bow and others in Custer County to further their efforts of housing. He has shared his knowledge and his experience. So we wanted to recognize him. And then the Ansley Investment Group received the Business Innovators Award from Custer Economic Development. It was an award that recognized one entity that is fulfilling a need in their community. And so if you've been a longtime participant, there's some familiar faces in that group photo as well. The owner of the Ansley Lumber spoke in August of 2020, and then in February of this year, Lance Bristol spoke about the progress that had been made by the investment group. So kudos to those entities and individuals. You can find those two or three webinars at our HomeNE.us website. So just search in Callaway and Ansley and they will come right up. And then our next webinar is, November 16th. It will be our last webinar of the year. If you are joining us for the first time today, we do not do a webinar in December, but we would love to have you join us as well. And we will be sending out information as we get closer to that event. I see that Tom has put his contact information in the chat box as well, so feel free to copy that down. But just as I conclude, I don't know, I can't speak for Mike, but for HomeNE to continue bringing webinars as we have for the past 5 years now, we need stories, and if they're in South Dakota, we will gladly take them. We don't always have to have success stories. We sometimes learn from the efforts of other individuals. So if you have a story, if you know somebody who's tackling the issue of housing in a community, maybe there's lessons to be learned, and let us know. We'll do the heavy lifting and getting those stories put together, but we need stories from all around the region. So thank you for all of you joining us today. We have our contact information as well as Mike's on there, and I would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to Sharon, myself, and or Mike about your thoughts for today and what you learned. We would love to get some feedback. So Mike, any final thoughts?
I think I just want to point people back to the question or the challenges that they identified at the beginning. Each of you said there's a challenge that you had in redeveloping a building. Did you take one small step towards finding a solution? I hope so. I hope you think about that. I hope you continue to share what you learned with other folks, but that's what it's about. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to all of you, and have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you next month.